everyone, and thank you for joining my speech today. And also, many thanks to the Hyper Games Conference for inviting me. My name is Eduard Musoiu, founder and CEO of Casual Hit Studio. And in my following presentation, I want to share with you some of the techniques I use to make my job easier in making my latest game that eventually became a hit. I will also share a few tips that helped me through my career as a hyper casual game developer, as well as answering your questions if you have any. So feel free to send them into the chat. So I'd say to let's dive into the presentation. First, a bit of my background. I founded in 2018 the studio in Romania, Casual Heat Studio. In that year, the hyper casual market was growing fast, and I was lucky enough to even publish my first game in that year. The game is Shoot, published by Voodoo. It wasn't a big success, but at that time it was uh, something that helped me to understand better the hyper casual market and also motivated me to want even more than that. So next year, I published my next game in collaboration with Monet, Crazy Climber. The game achieved about 5 million downloads, and it was a great milestone for me. So after 2 years from releasing Crazy Climber, I published my next game, Rope Run, in partnership with Supersonic. It is the game. It's a runner, and the base idea of it's that you play as a character that is made out of rope and dodge through obstacles in order to get to the end of the level. When the player hits an obstacle, the part that collided with that obstacle get unraveled, creating this satisfying effect of unraveling rope that our players seems to love. Thanks to supersonic user acquisition capabilities, I was able to reach a good spot in the top charts on both Google Play and App Store, number 5 on Google Play US and number 3 on App Store US, with a great average revenue per user of 30 cents, even from the day zero. But it wasn't an easy achievement to get. There was a lot of challenges that had to be solved from my side as a developer, as well as Supersonic side as the publisher. So today I want to share with you some of the challenges behind the scenes of developing this game and how I managed to overcome those. The first challenge that I had, it's that I had to find a solution for to create the rope character. This is actually the first thing I did before even starting developing the actual gameplay, because the character in my vision was the most important aspect of the game. Another challenge that I faced was the level design. I had to find a way to create levels fast, but also the level design had to be up to the standards of other runner games at that time in the top charts, so that the game had have the best chances for success. And as the game kept getting updated and more system getting implementing into it, the performance at some point got became a problem. But I had to optimize some things there and here and there, and I will show you exactly how and what I did. So let's see how I creating the rock character. The challenge was to create the character without too much 3D modeling skills. So the solution was to develop a system that it's generating the rope character for me with my minimal intervention. The concept behind this system can be compared with the techniques used in this video. You can see the person from this video. It's wrapping up a skeleton of a heart using wool, creating this nice wrapped effect. So what I did with my basic 3D modeling skills, I created this puppet over a pre-existing rig. This puppet is built with primitive shapes like capsules and spheres. And here you can see uh, now you can see uh, in action the system that takes each part of the puppet and wrap it with a tube mesh and then assembling the parts back into place, resulting in this base body for my ropeman. And after tweaks and some improvements, I ended up with a character that it's looking like this. And also using the same technique, I was able to create other models too that I used in my game to add different mechanics like riding a bike motorcycle, for example, at the suggestion of a game designer from Supersonic. And by implementing this rope motorcycle, we managed to improve the KPIs and eventually publish the game. Now that I had the character, the next challenge was to make the character shine, but without using any fancy real-time reflections or lighting for a better performance. So the solution was to create a custom shader using shader graph that at the core has these simple technique called material capture. This technique work by projecting a 2D image of a pre-rendered material on the 3D mesh you want to render using some simple equations, resulting in a nice looking render like you can see here without using any real-time processes, as all the data that the shader program needs to render the mesh with this reflection, color, and lighting, it's stored into the 2D image of the pre-rendered material. And the cool thing about using this technique is that you can create materials you want to use in any 3D software and add all sorts of colors combinations or effects, giving you countless possibilities. And here you can see few of the character skins I created using this technique, each looking like it's made out of a different substance like gold or obsidians, and all of these at the lowest cost possible in terms of performance, and not just the performance but also the in terms of time, because I made those skins pretty fast. And also by combining the material capture technique with different effects I added in the shader using shader graph, I was able to create some visual appealing VFX to make the game more juicy, and also to add even more character skins like the green one you can see on the right side. It's a character that has projected over it a texture of zeros and ones, creating this nice hacker style skin. At some point, I saw a video of my game on YouTube that had a thumbnail where the roadman had this kind of hacker effect on it. So I decided to create and implement it. The next technical challenge was the level design. I had to find a method to generate a lot of levels as fast as possible while trying to add the element of fun on each of the levels. The solution was to create a level editor that will allow me to unleash my creativity and make fun levels. I call I called it Photoshop but for Roadman levels. This level editor consists of two main components. The first one is the road editor tool that create a road along a spline, and after I put the points of the spline, I can edit and give the road any shape I want. And the second component is a system that places the objects along a level at any given position I want, but also having the possibility to change the shape of the road even after I place the objects along it, making it very easy to iterate whenever I head on any of the levels. I also added the possibility to create holes, gaps into the road, to add platforms where the players can jump, and other features too, that made the process of creating the levels a lot more fun than just placing the objects by hand or uh, more any process that is causing pain while you create the levels. Here you can see a comparison of before and after the level editor. As you can see on the left side, in the early version of Ropeman, the level design was pretty basic, only straight levels without any turns or curves and more fancy things. But on the other side, you can see the first version where I used this level editor to create the levels, and you may notice that it looks more fun with curvy road, walls to climb, and additional obstacles, and it added some value to the game. But now let's talk a little bit about performance optimization, because as I said earlier, so at some point it became a problem. But and for identifying the leaks I had into my game, I used the Unity profiler to identify them and to take action accordingly. And what I noticed was that the mesh deformation system that the rope character was using, uh, it was eating the most of the resources. So I decided to move the deformation system from the CPU because it was using the CPU to move the vertices. I moved this mesh deformation algorithm from the GPU to from the CPU to the GPU. You can see from the Unity profiler here that the performance is much better when using the GPU because it do not create any calls, any garbage collector calls, as well as being faster modifying the thousands of vertices I had to deform. The next system that I implemented and helped me to improve the overall performance uh, was implementing a pooling system for the objects that had to be created and destroyed very rapidly. So when you create and destroy objects in Unity very rapidly, Unity creates some calls to the garbage collector to allocate or deallocate memory, and usually this takes some CPU, some performance from the CPU, and you don't want that. You want to use the resources to make the game fun and not do boring stuff under the hood. Oh, sorry about that. Just a second. My mistake. All right, here we go. Another nice performance boost I was able to achieve was by optimizing my UI. Here you can see a few optimizations that I did and return a positive outcome, improving the overall performance by just a few milliseconds, but my OCD was very happy about. For example, by dividing up the canvases, I mean to have a separate canvas for each of your game screens, like windscreen or fail screen, in order to reduce the CPU usage, the canvas needs to be drawn. And also, you can remove the unnecessarily raycast targets because if you do not, for example, a text on a button, if you turn off the raycast target, it will reduce the number of intersection checks that the graphics raycaster must perform on each frame, and it will be more performance if will have few of the intersection checks to make. And also, another thing that I did to reduce the draw call was to use texture atlases for the UI, so that the UI will get drawn in batches, which makes the game smoother. Also, using the canvas renderer to disable a canvas, it's more performant than just disabling the game object of that canvas, because when you disable the game object, Unity will re remove from the memory, let's say, the vertex buffer that it has for that canvas. But when you only disable the canvas renderer, Unity will keep in memory that vertex buffer, and next time when you enable it, it doesn't have to be rebuilt from scratch, which is again more performant. And as we get to the end of the presentation, I want to share with you some tips that helped me through the process of creating a hit. The tips are not in a particular order, so each one of them is as important as another in my opinion. Sorry. So the first one, the first advice I want to give to you is to use a use custom editor scripts, because this will help you to move a lot faster and also will give you the impression that you have some kind of superpower, as you can create buttons with custom action depending on your needs, making your pipeline a lot more efficient. The next tip is to always use a version control system like GitHub or any other version control system uh, there are out there. Sometimes you find yourself in the situation when you have to revert to an older version because the new version you tested didn't bring any positive outcome. So by using a version control system, you will be able to revert to an older version of your game at any time in just a few clicks. If you are not familiar with those systems, I highly recommend you to go ahead and research a bit about the subject, because it will be very useful at some point in the process of creating a hit. If you already use it, good for you. The next tip I want to give is to never release a new version of 100 a new version to 100% of your users, but when the game is published, because things can break and you don't want things to break. You want, if uh, you, they break anyway, but you want to break small, not to break big. So you have time to uh, find the problem and fix, and also release the fix as soon as possible without affecting a big amount of users. So let's say you have a new version and you launch it to 100%, as you may do, and there is a bug that you missed. Uh, Maybe a bug that it's crashing the game for a user that did an action that most of the user will do, because this is what happens when you have a lot of users. And if you list this version to 100% of your users, there is a big chance that all of them will get the new, most of them will get the new version and find this bug. But if you just released to, let's say, 10%, and you waited 1-2 days to see what is the feedback, or check the Firebase errors and crashes and exceptions, you will be able to identify it without having the guilt over your head that a lot of users are affected by your mistake. and you will be able to uh, fix it and go ahead and release to 100%, very more safe, let's say. And finally, another tip I want to give to you, it's to never give up. And here I don't think to I have to tell you why, because you know better why. Be patient, uh, believe in releasing a hit, and eventually I'm sure you will do. And now I want to thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't made anyone to get bored or anything like that. If so, I'm very sorry. This is my first ever presentation at a conference. So in the next few moments, I will get back and answer all of your questions if there are any. So thanks again for attention, and see you in a few moments.
Okay, so I think it's time for questions now. The first question is, while designing the level, did you randomly place the objects according to the level of the player, or did you design the levels manually?
All the levels have been designed by hand, but with the editor tool that I had, it was flawlessly. So it was very easy to do that, and also it helps to create a better experience for the players because you know exactly at any level what obstacles you have, what happens, and it's easier for the level design to be this way. At first you can of course place them randomly to have an idea about the KPIs of the game, but after that it's better to do them by hand.
Okay, great, thank you. Uh, and the next question is, what are maybe what the point are you most proud of developing your games and why?
What is the point that I'm the most proud,
Yeah,
like
some feature maybe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's the actually the level editor itself, because it's the first time I did some tool, and it really helped me to release a hit.
Okay, great. The next one. How do you divide players for testing new version?
Uh, on Google Play, you have this option to launch a version to, let's say, 10% of your existing users, or of the new users that is coming. When you upload the update, there will be an text box to where you will enter the amount of users you want to release this update for, and it really helps to identify problems, if any, and be safer when launching a new update.
All right. And the next one. Would you use procedural levels instead of manual to increase level count?
I didn't use procedural levels, but it's something that I can do, but not at the moment.
Okay, great. And also, we have thanks for the great talk and the question. Have
Thank you
you
too.
how have you handled the curved road movement?
The road that it's curved.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How have you handled the road movement? Yeah.
The road, it's procedural generated using a third party spline solution. Using
Mhm.
that spline solution, it generates the road for me. That's it.
Okay, okay. So I think uh, we are out of time. So the rest of the questions you can read and ask in chat in Pine, and uh, we can go on.
Sure.
Thank you one more time, Edward.
Also, thank you a lot for inviting me, and see you at the next conference. Bye.
Bye.